The resignation letter was 3 sentences long. Juliet had written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to find words that wouldn't reveal too much. In the end, she'd settled for simple, clean, the kind of professional distance that Mr. Alessi would expect from an employee who had never been anything more than furniture in his world. Dear Mr. Alessi, I am writing to inform you of my resignation, effective immediately. I am grateful for the opportunity to have worked for the Alessi family. I wish you continued success in all your endeavors. Respectfully, Juliet Marino. She read it one more time, her heart cracking with every word. Then she folded it into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it on his desk. His office was empty. It was nearly midnight, and he was in a meeting somewhere in the depths of the estate. The kind of meeting she was never invited to, never wanted to know about. The kind that left blood on knuckles and silence in its wake. She'd learned not to ask questions. That was rule number 1. Rule number 2 was, don't fall in love with the boss. She'd broken that one spectacularly. Juliet turned to leave, and that's when the notebook slipped from her bag. It hit the floor with a soft thud, pages spilling open like a wound. She grabbed it quickly, shoving it back into place, but in her haste, a page tore free, ripping along the perforated edge with a sound that seemed far too loud in the silent office. She didn't notice. She was too busy running. Down the hallway, out the service entrance, into the cold night air. Her grandmother's apartment was 20 minutes by bus. She'd be there by 1 a.m., bags packed, ready to disappear before the Castellanos realized she'd chosen silence over betrayal. It wasn't until she was 3 blocks away that she realized the page was missing. Dominic Alessi returned to his office at midnight. The meeting had gone poorly. The Castellanos were pushing again, probing for weaknesses, testing boundaries he'd thought were set in stone. They wanted something. He could feel it, but he couldn't figure out what. The envelope on his desk stopped him cold. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Small, precise, elegant, the same handwriting that filled the margins of every document she translated, that left him notes about scheduling conflicts and dietary preferences and the 100 tiny details that kept his life running smoothly. Juliet. He tore open the envelope and read the letter twice, 3 times. His jaw tightened with each pass. Resignation, effective immediately. No explanation, no warning. Just 3 sentences and a polite goodbye from the woman who had been a quiet constant in his life for the past year. Something was wrong. He was about to reach for his phone when he noticed the paper on the floor. It was crumpled, torn along one edge, covered in handwriting that was less controlled than the letter. More raw. He picked it up, smoothed it flat, and began to read. He doesn't see me. I stand 3 feet away and translate his words into languages he'll never know I love, and he looks through me like I'm made of glass. Clear, empty, invisible. But I see him. I see him reading Dante at 3 a.m. when he thinks the house is asleep. I see him slipping cash into Marco's pocket when the old gardener's wife needs surgery. I see him sitting with Leo during the panic attacks, holding his brother's hand, counting breaths, being the anchor that keeps a drowning boy afloat. I see the man he hides from the world, and I love him. God help me, I love him so much it's killing me. But I have to go. They found Nonna, the Castellanos. They know where she lives, where she shops, the name of the nurse who checks on her every Tuesday. They want information, names, schedules, the keys to the kingdom. I won't give them anything. I'd rather die than betray him. So I'm leaving, disappearing, taking Nonna somewhere they can't reach us. It's the only way to protect them both. The man I love and the woman who raised me. He'll never know why I left. He'll never know any of it. That's the tragedy of loving a man who doesn't know you exist. You can break your heart for him, and he won't even notice it's gone. Dominic read the page 3 times. His hands were shaking by the end, a tremor he hadn't felt since he was 18 years old, standing over his parents' bodies, swearing vengeance on the men who had taken them. She loved him. She'd been protecting him. And the Castellanos had been threatening her grandmother, to turn her into a weapon against him. He reached for his phone and dialed Nico. "Find Juliet Marino." His voice was ice. "Now, before anyone else does." "Boss, it's the middle of the night. I don't care if it's the end of the world. Find her. Bring her back." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked in a way it hadn't in 15 years. "She's in danger, and I need her safe." Silence on the line. Then, "Understood. We're on it." Dominic hung up and looked at the torn page in his hand, at the words that had ripped him open and put him back together in the span of 60 seconds. I'd rather die than betray him. She'd chosen him. Chosen his safety over her own, his secrets over her survival. She'd been carrying the weight of the Castellanos' threats alone, and instead of coming to him, instead of trusting him to protect her, she decided to disappear. Because she thought he didn't see her. She was wrong. He'd seen her from the first moment she walked into his office, a nervous 23-year-old with a resume full of languages and eyes that held more depth than the Mediterranean. He'd watched her calm his brother when no one else could, watched her treat the staff with a kindness that had no place in his world, watched her read poetry in the garden when she thought no one was looking. He'd kept his distance because he thought she deserved better than a man with blood on his hands. He'd built walls between them because he was terrified of what would happen if he let them fall. And now she was gone. Running from monsters, carrying a love she thought was invisible, believing that the man she'd silently devoted herself to didn't even know her name. Dominic Alessi hadn't felt fear in a very long time. But tonight, staring at a torn page filled with words that changed everything, he felt it crawling up his spine like ice. He wasn't going to lose her. Not now. Not ever. Not when he'd finally realized that the quiet woman who organized his life had somehow, impossibly, become the center of it. Juliet was packing her grandmother's photograph when the door burst open. She spun, her heart slamming against her ribs, expecting Castellanos' men, expecting the worst. Instead, she found Dominic Alessi standing in the doorway of her tiny apartment, his chest heaving, his dark eyes wild with something she'd never seen before. Fear. He was afraid. "Mr. Alessi." She stepped back, her grandmother's picture clutched to her chest. "How did you find me?" "You left something behind." He held up the torn page and Juliet's world collapsed. No, 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 no. She'd written those words in the safety of darkness, never intending for anyone to see them. And now he was standing in her doorway, holding her heart in his hands, looking at her like she'd just pulled the ground out from under his feet. "I can explain. Can you?" He stepped into the apartment and closed the door behind him. The space was too small for a man his size. He seemed to fill every corner, his presence overwhelming. "Can you explain why you were going to disappear without telling me the Castellanos were threatening you? Why you were going to run instead of letting me protect you?" "Because I couldn't betray you." The words tore out of her before she could stop them. They wanted names, schedules, access codes. They wanted me to help them destroy you, and I couldn't. I wouldn't. "So you decided to destroy yourself instead?" "I decided to keep you safe. By breaking my heart?" The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, uncomprehending. Sure, she'd misheard. "What?" Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands shook as he reached for her face. "You wrote that I don't see you." His voice was rough, broken. You wrote that you're invisible to me, that loving me is killing you. I didn't mean for you to read that. I see you, Juliet. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, catching tears she hadn't realized she was crying. I've seen you from the first day you walked into my office. I've watched you calm my brother when I couldn't. I've listened to you read Neruda in the garden when you thought no one could hear. I've memorized the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous, and the way you bite your lip when you're translating something difficult, and the way your whole face lights up when you laugh. But you barely even spoke to me. Because I was terrified. The confession seemed to cost him something. Because you're good, Juliet. Genuinely, impossibly good. And I have so much blood on my hands that I couldn't bear the thought of staining you. That wasn't your choice to make. I know. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt him trembling. I know. And I'm sorry. And I swear to God, if you give me the chance, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Dominic, come home with me. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let me protect you. Let me protect your grandmother. Let me show you what a man looks like when he stops hiding from the only woman who's ever truly seen him. Juliet's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The cold, distant boss who had haunted her dreams for a year was standing in her crumbling apartment, cradling her face in his hands, telling her she was the light he'd been too afraid to reach for. The Castellanos will be dealt with. His expression hardened, a flash of the predator beneath the surface. No one threatens what's mine, and you, Juliet. His voice softened again. You've been mine since the moment I met you. I was just too much of a coward to claim you. I'm not a possession. No, you're a gift. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her ache. One I don't deserve. But I'm asking anyway. Come home with me, please. She should say no. Should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of loving a man who lived in shadows. Should run, the way she'd planned, and never look back. But she thought of his hands trembling against her face, his voice cracking on the word heart, the fear in his eyes when he'd burst through her door, terrified that he'd already lost her. This wasn't a man who didn't feel. This was a man who felt so deeply he'd built an empire to hide from it. And she'd spent a year trying to find the words for what she saw in him. Now he was standing in front of her, offering her everything she'd ever wanted. Okay, she whispered. Take me home. The tension drained from his body. He pulled her against his chest and held her there, his heart hammering beneath her ear, his arms wrapped around her like he'd never let go. Your grandmother, he murmured into her hair. Where is she? At her apartment. I was going to get her in the morning. We'll get her tonight. She'll have her own suite at the estate, private nurses, everything she needs. He pulled back to look at her. I protect what's mine, Juliet, and that includes everyone you love. You barely know her. I know she raised you. His thumb brushed across her cheek. That's enough. For the first time in months, Juliet felt something loosen in her chest. The fear that had been choking her since the Castellanos first made contact began to ease, replaced by something fragile and unfamiliar. Hope. The Alessi estate had always intimidated Juliet. 3 stories of Tuscan architecture, sprawling gardens, a security system that could rival the Pentagon. It was the kind of place that belonged in magazines, not in the life of a girl who'd grown up in foster homes and group houses. For a year, she'd moved through its halls like a ghost, keeping her head down, doing her job, trying not to leave fingerprints on anything that mattered. Now she was walking through the front door with Dominic's hand on her lower back, and everything had changed. Your room is in the East Wing. His voice was close to her ear, warm and low. Near mine. Your grandmother is being settled in the suite next door. This is too much. It's not enough. He stopped walking and turned her to face him. You carried the weight of the Castellanos' threats alone for months. You were willing to sacrifice everything to protect me. The least I can do is give you a safe place to sleep. I was your assistant. It was my job to. You were never just my assistant. His dark eyes held hers. You were the only person in this house who looked at me and saw something other than a monster. You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things. That's not the same. She reached up and touched his face, tentatively, still not quite believing she was allowed. A monster wouldn't read Dante to his brother during panic attacks. A monster wouldn't slip money to the gardener when his wife got sick. A monster wouldn't cross the city at midnight to find a woman he barely spoke to. Something shifted in his expression. The walls he'd kept so carefully in place began to crumble, revealing the man she'd always known was underneath. How do you see so much? His voice was hoarse. How do you look at me and find things I've spent years trying to hide? Because I've been watching. She smiled softly. That's what happens when you love someone from a distance. You learn to read the silences. He kissed her then. Not the desperate, searching kiss she might have expected, but something gentler, slower. The kind of kiss that said, I've been waiting for you, and I'm not letting go. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, and Juliet felt her heart crack open and reform around him. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. We have a lot to talk about, he murmured. The Castellanos. What happens next? But right now, I just need. He stopped, swallowed. I need to know you're real, that you're here, that you're not going to disappear the moment I look away. I'm not going anywhere. She laced her fingers through his. Not anymore. The following weeks were a revelation. Juliet had spent a year observing Dominic from the margins of his life. Now she was at the center of it, and the view was entirely different. He was softer than she'd imagined. Funnier. He made terrible jokes that only landed half the time and laughed at himself when they didn't. He brought her coffee every morning, exactly how she liked it, a detail she hadn't realized he'd noticed, and left volumes of poetry on her pillow with his favorite passages marked. And he touched her constantly, nothing demanding, nothing possessive, just small points of contact that seemed to ground him. A hand on her back when they walked together, fingers brushing hers across the dinner table, an arm around her waist when they stood on the balcony watching the sunset. It was as if, having finally allowed himself to reach for her, he couldn't bear to let go. But it wasn't just Dominic who drew her in. It was the whole family. Leo was 19 years old with his brother's dark hair and their mother's gentle eyes. He'd been 11 when their parents were murdered, old enough to remember, young enough to be shattered by it. The trauma had left him with anxiety so severe he rarely left the estate, his world shrinking to the size of a gilded cage. But with Juliet, he bloomed. You actually like my poetry? He stared at her across the library table, a battered notebook clutched in his hands. Dom says it's good, but he has to say that. He's my brother. It's better than good. Juliet smiled. It's raw, honest. The metaphor in the third stanza, the one about drowning in still water, that's going to stay with me for a long time. Really? Really? She reached out and squeezed his hand. Keep writing, Leo. The world needs voices like yours. Something brightened in his face. The first real light she'd seen there since she arrived. From that moment on, he sought her out constantly, sharing new poems, asking for feedback, slowly emerging from the shell he'd built around himself. I don't know what you're doing, Dominic said one evening, watching his brother laugh at something Juliet had said, but I haven't seen him this happy in years. I'm just treating him like a person, like someone whose words matter. That's rarer than you think. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. You're healing my family, Juliet. One person at a time. You're healing me too. She looked up at him. I spent 24 years feeling invisible, feeling like I didn't matter to anyone except my grandmother. And then you burst through my door and told me you'd seen me all along. I should have told you sooner. You're telling me now. That's what matters. But even as the days grew warmer and the love between them deepened, shadows gathered at the edges. The Castellanos hadn't forgotten. Juliet noticed it in small ways at first, the tension in Dominic's shoulders after certain phone calls, the increased security around the estate, the way Nico started escorting her grandmother to her medical appointments instead of sending a regular driver. Then came the photographs. They arrived in a manila envelope, slipped under the front gate, addressed to Dominic Alessi in elegant calligraphy. Inside were a dozen images: Juliet in the garden, Juliet reading to Leo in the library, Juliet standing on the balcony with Dominic, his arms wrapped around her waist, and at the bottom of the stack, a single photograph of her grandmother, asleep in her bed at the estate, taken through the window. We can reach her anywhere, the attached note read. Give us what we want, or watch everyone you love disappear. Dominic's rage was a terrifying thing to witness. He didn't shout, didn't throw things. He simply went still, a predator sighting prey. And when he spoke, his voice was so cold it burned. How did they get these? How did they get inside my security? Someone on the staff. Nico's face was grim. We're working to identify them. Work faster. Dominic's hands curled into fists, and double the guards on Juliet's grandmother. Triple them. No one gets near her without my explicit authorization. Dom! Juliet stepped forward, her heart pounding. What are they going to do? He turned to her, and beneath the fury she saw fear. Raw, desperate fear. Nothing. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. They're going to do nothing because I'm going to find them first. I'm going to tear the Castellano family apart brick by brick. And when I'm done, there won't be anyone left to threaten you. I don't want you to become a monster for me. I already am a monster. He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were dark with something dangerous. The difference is, now I have something worth being monstrous for. Dominic, I told you I'd protect what's mine. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I meant it. Every word. I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you or the people you love. Juliet should have been frightened, should have recoiled from the violence in his voice, the darkness in his eyes. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him, fierce and desperate and full of everything she couldn't say. Then burn it, she whispered against his lips. But come back to me when it's done. Always. He held her tighter. Always, Juliet. That's not even a question. But even as he made his promises, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. The Castellanos had made their move, and she was terrified of what Dominic would have to become to stop them. The traitor was found 3 days later. Maria, one of the housekeepers. She'd worked for the Alessi family for 5 years, her record spotless, her references impeccable. She'd also been passing information to the Castellanos for 6 months, paid in cash, and promises that her gambling debts would disappear. Dominic dealt with her himself. Juliet didn't ask what that meant. She was learning that there were parts of his world she couldn't follow him into. Dark rooms where dark things happened. Necessary evils that kept the people she loved alive. She hated it. But she was beginning to understand it. The leak is plugged, he told her that night, finding her in the library where she'd been failing to read the same page for an hour. The Castellanos won't get any more information from inside these walls. But they're still out there. Not for long. He sat beside her on the sofa, his body heavy with exhaustion. I've called a meeting. Tomorrow night. Neutral territory. A meeting? Juliet's blood ran cold. You mean a trap? I mean a negotiation. His jaw tightened. One way or another, this ends tomorrow. What if they don't want to negotiate? Then it ends a different way. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I'm scared. I know. He lifted her hand to his lips. But I need you to trust me. I've been doing this a long time, Juliet. I know how to handle men like the Castellanos. It's not your ability I doubt. It's their desperation. She met his eyes. Desperate men do desperate things. Then it's a good thing I'm more dangerous than I am desperate. He kissed her. Slow and deep. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise and a prayer all at once. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Tomorrow night, he murmured. When this is over, I'm going to take you somewhere far away. Somewhere with no enemies, no threats, no shadows. Just you and me and the rest of our lives. That sounds like a fairy tale. Maybe. His lips curved. But I've decided you deserve one. The meeting was set for an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of the city. Juliet wasn't supposed to be there. Dominic had been explicit. She was to stay at the estate with Leo and her grandmother, protected by a small army of guards, safe behind walls that had withstood attacks before. But at the last moment, everything changed. The call came at 6 p.m. A blocked number. A voice Juliet didn't recognize. Miss Marino, we have someone who wants to speak with you. A pause, then, Juliet? Juliet, honey, is that you? Her grandmother's voice, thin with fear, trembling in a way Juliet had never heard before. Nonna! She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Nonna, where are you? What happened? They took me, sweetheart. They came in through the... A scuffle, a cry of pain. Then the first voice returned. The meeting tonight. You're going to be there, alone, or the old woman dies. Please, she has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. She's leverage, Miss Marino. Just like you. A cold laugh. Come alone. Tell no one. If Alessi finds out, we'll know, and your grandmother will pay the price. The line went dead. Juliet stood frozen, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. They had her grandmother. They'd gotten through the security, the guards, the walls that were supposed to keep everyone safe. She should tell Dominic. She knew she should. But the voice had been so certain. If Alessi finds out, we'll know. There had to be another traitor, another leak, someone watching, waiting to see if she obeyed. She couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk her grandmother's life on the hope that Dominic could save them both. So she did the only thing she could think of. She wrote him a note, sealed it in an envelope, and left it on his pillow where he'd find it when he returned. Then she walked out of the estate and into the night. The factory was dark and cold, filled with the ghosts of machines long since stripped for parts. Juliet stepped through the side entrance the Castellanos had specified, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The space was vast, concrete floors, rusted beams, broken windows that let in shafts of moonlight. And at the center, illuminated by a single lamp, stood a group of men. Her grandmother was there, bound to a chair, her white hair disheveled, her face pale with terror, but alive. Thank God, alive. Miss Marino. A man stepped forward, tall, silver-haired, with the cold eyes of a predator. Victor Castellano himself. How good of you to join us. I'm here. Let her go. Not yet. He circled her slowly, appraising. You've caused us quite a bit of trouble. We made you a simple offer. Information in exchange for protection. And instead of accepting, you ran to Alessi, became his whore. I didn't tell him anything about you. No, But you told him about us, about our approach, our leverage. His smile was cruel. That changes the calculus, Miss Marino. Now we need something more than information. We need a message. What kind of message? The kind that reminds Dominic Alessi that he's not invincible. Victor nodded to one of his men. Kill the old woman. No. Juliet lunged forward, but hands grabbed her, pinned her arms behind her back. Please, she's innocent. She has nothing to do with any of this. Exactly. Victor's eyes glittered. That's what makes her death so effective. The man raised his gun. Juliet screamed, and the wall exploded. Not the whole wall. Just a section, blown inward by a shaped charge that sent concrete and dust spraying across the factory floor. Through the breach poured men in black, Dominic's men, armed to the teeth, moving with lethal precision. And at their head, his face a mask of cold fury, was Dominic himself. Step away from them. His voice echoed through the space, calm and deadly. Now. Victor's composure cracked. How did you? You think I'd let her walk into a trap without backup? Dominic moved forward, his gun trained on Victor's chest. I've had eyes on her since the moment she left the estate. I know about the call. I know about the second traitor. I know everything. Then you know that if you shoot me, my men will kill them both before your people can— Your men are already dead. Victor's head whipped around. The men who had been positioned throughout the factory were down. Silent, efficient kills that had happened in the shadows while everyone was focused on the breach. Only Victor and the man by Juliet's grandmother remained. Let them go, Dominic said quietly. And I'll make your death quick. You think I'm afraid of death? Victor laughed, but there was panic beneath it. Kill me, and my family will— Your family is finished. I've spent the last 3 days dismantling your operation piece by piece. Your accounts are frozen. Your allies have abandoned you. Your soldiers are either dead or on their way to prison. Dominic's smile was terrifying. You came after the woman I love. Did you really think I wouldn't respond with everything I have? Victor's face went white. Juliet. Dominic's voice softened, just slightly. Are you hurt? I'm okay. Her voice shook. My grandmother. Nico. Get Mrs. Marino to safety. Nico materialized from the shadows, cutting the ropes that bound the old woman and lifting her gently in his arms. He carried her toward the breach, toward safety, and Juliet felt tears streaming down her face. Now. Dominic turned back to Victor. Where were we? Wait. Juliet pulled free from the man holding her. He let her go, apparently recognizing that the battle was lost, and crossed to stand beside Dominic. Don't. Don't what? Don't kill him. She touched his arm. Not like this. Not in cold blood. He threatened to murder your grandmother in front of you. I know. And I want him to pay for that. She met his eyes. But I don't want you to become the monster he says you are. Not for me. Not for revenge. Juliet, you told me once that you've done monstrous things, that you have blood on your hands. Her fingers tightened on his arm. But you've also told me you want to be different. Better. That you want to deserve me. She paused. This is your chance to prove it. The silence stretched between them. Dominic's jaw worked, his whole body vibrating with the need for violence. Then, slowly, he lowered his gun. Nico. His voice was ice. Take Mr. Castellano somewhere secure. Make sure he's comfortable. A pause. He's going to have a long time to think about his choices. Victor's face twisted. You think a prison cell is mercy? I'll get out. I'll come back. You'll spend the rest of your life in a concrete box, knowing that you lost everything because you underestimated the woman I love. Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. That's not mercy. That's a different kind of death. and you're going to experience every second of it. They dragged Victor away. The factory fell silent, and then Dominic was turning to her, pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You should have told me," his voice cracked. "When they called, you should have come to me." "I was afraid. They said they'd know if I talked to you." "I had you followed the moment you left your room. The note you left. I found it in seconds." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You scared me, Juliet. You scared me more than anyone has in 15 years. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just—" He pressed his forehead to hers. "Just don't ever do that again. Don't walk into danger alone. Don't try to protect me by sacrificing yourself. We face things together or not at all. Understand?" "Together." She nodded against him. "I understand." He kissed her, desperate, fierce, full of all the fear he'd been holding back. She kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring everything into it, her terror, her relief, her overwhelming, impossible love for this man who had just torn apart an empire to keep her safe. When they finally broke apart, he cupped her face in his hands. "Let's go home," he said softly. "Your grandmother is waiting. Leo is probably having a panic attack, and I desperately need to hold you somewhere that doesn't smell like rust and concrete." Juliet laughed, a watery, broken sound. "Take me home," she whispered, "and don't ever let me go." "Never." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's a promise I'll keep until I die." 6 months later, Juliet sat in the garden and watched her grandmother teach Leo how to make pasta. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, the air sweet with the scent of roses and basil. Her grandmother's laughter drifted across the lawn, stronger now, happier than Juliet had seen her in years. The private nurses and the safe, comfortable suite had done wonders, but it was the family that had truly healed her. The sense of belonging, the knowledge that she would never be alone again. And Leo? Leo was a different person entirely. He'd started leaving the estate 3 months ago. Small trips at first. A coffee shop 2 blocks away, a bookstore across town. Then larger ones. A poetry reading at a local college. A visit to the museum Juliet had mentioned loving as a child. His anxiety wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled him. He was learning to live alongside it instead of being consumed by it. "Your grandmother is trying to teach me the family secret," he called across the garden, flour dusting his dark hair. "She says I'm hopeless." "You are hopeless," Juliet called back, "but we love you anyway." "That's what family is for." Her grandmother patted Leo's cheek with flour-covered hands. "Loving each other despite our hopelessness." Juliet smiled, her heart full to bursting. This was what she'd always wanted, what she'd dreamed about in those lonely foster homes, those cold group houses. A family, a place to belong. People who loved her not because they had to, but because they chose to. "You're doing that thing again." Dominic's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. She felt him settle onto the bench beside her, his arms sliding around her waist. "What thing?" "The thing where you look at everyone like you can't quite believe they're real." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You get this expression on your face, like you're waiting for someone to tell you it's all a dream." "Maybe I am." "It's not a dream." He turned her face toward his. "It's your life, our life, and it's only going to get better from here." "How do you know?" "Because I'm going to make sure of it." His dark eyes held hers. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather journal, worn at the edges, filled with handwriting she recognized immediately. Her notebook, the one she'd thought she'd lost the night she tried to run. "Where did you find this?" "It fell out of your bag that night. I've had it ever since." He placed it in her hands. I read it. All of it. Every poem, every observation, every word you wrote when you thought no one was watching. Juliet's cheeks flushed. Dominic, you see me. His voice was rough. In these pages, you see me in ways I didn't know I could be seen. The man reading Dante, the brother holding Leo's hand, the boss who slips money to his employees when they need it. He paused. You found the best parts of me and wrote them down like they were poetry, like they were beautiful. They are beautiful. They're only beautiful because you saw them that way. He cupped her face in his hands. You made me want to be the man you wrote about, Juliet. The man who deserves love like yours. You've always been that man. You just needed someone to remind you. He kissed her, soft and slow, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. There's one more thing. More? Open the journal, last page. Juliet frowned, confused, but did as he asked. She flipped to the back of the notebook and found a page that wasn't her handwriting at all. It was his. Juliet dash dash. I've never been good with words. That's your gift, not mine. But I've spent the last 6 months trying to find the right ones, and I think I finally have. You saw me when I was invisible to myself. You loved me when I didn't know how to be loved. You walked into my darkness and refused to leave, even when I tried to push you away. I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. Being the man you see in your poems. Being yours, in every way that matters. Will you marry me? Juliet looked up, her vision blurred with tears. Dominic was holding a ring, a deep sapphire surrounded by diamonds, glittering in the afternoon light like captured pieces of the sky. I wanted to do something grand, he said quietly. A restaurant, a sunset, something romantic. But then I realized, this is us. Words on a page, seeing each other when no one else does. His voice cracked. So I wrote it down, the way you would have. Dominic, say yes. He was trembling. This man who had faced down enemies and built empires, trembling before her like a boy asking for his first dance. Please, Juliet, say yes. She laughed through her tears, a bright, joyous sound that echoed across the garden. Leo and her grandmother had stopped their pasta making, watching with barely contained excitement. Yes. She threw her arms around his neck. Yes, Dominic. 1,000 times? Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, deep and fierce and full of promise. Behind them, Leo whooped with joy. Her grandmother burst into happy tears. The garden erupted in celebration, and Juliet held on to the man she loved, the notebook pressed between them, and thought about all the words she'd written in secret. All the poems about a man she thought would never love her back. She'd been wrong. She'd been so beautifully, wonderfully wrong. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too. He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were bright with the kind of happiness she'd once thought he was incapable of. My poet, my translator, my heart. That's a lot of titles. You deserve more, he grinned. But we'll start with wife, and work from there. That evening, after the champagne had been drunk and the congratulations exchanged, Juliet stood on the balcony and looked out at the stars. She thought about the girl who had written that resignation letter. The woman who had believed she was invisible, unloved, destined to spend her life on the margins of someone else's story. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who had learned that love wasn't about being seen by everyone, it was about being seen by the right person. Someone who had discovered that even the darkest souls could find their way to light, if they were brave enough to reach for it. She had tried to quit her job and run away. Instead, she had found her home. Dominic's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? About how I almost left. She leaned back into him. About how different my life would be if I had. But you didn't. No. She smiled, touching the ring on her finger. I dropped a page instead. Best mistake you ever made. The best, she agreed. Because it led me to you. He turned her in his arms and kissed her under the stars, and Juliet let herself believe in fairy tales. After all, she was living one. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.